Yeah, Clubhouse. I want somebody to do a platform like Restream where you can put them all in one, and that's it. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter video, Twitter Spaces, terrestrial radio. Oh, time to go. All right. See you in a minute.
Hey, gang. This is Up the Middle with your hosts on the right, the homeless conservative Blake Fisher, and on the left, the Democratic nominee for Congress in the 7th District of Ohio, Matt Deemer. And somewhere in the middle, I'm retired Secret Service Special Agent Ross Yergz. You'll come to know me as Yergz. Let's get to it.
Hey, gang, just me today. Oh, wait, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. Oh, there he is. There's one. There he is. Yesterday's guest joining us today, and I'm glad we kind of have this moment because you two need to meet each other. But I need to first better introduce both of you. Anyway, yesterday, back up to May, I had a meeting scheduled through Podmatch, something that I definitely love, and met some great people on there. This gentleman at the bottom of your screen, and I'll rearrange us so we're meeting on the political spectrum appropriately, and our actual guest today, joining us on Up the Middle for the first time. I allow appointments on Saturdays that you can schedule through your membership. And one Friday night, I was just so happy my week was over. I get to sleep in tomorrow, having no idea that there was already a 10:30 meeting scheduled for the next day. And I slept right through it. But this gentleman was kind enough to reschedule. He is Philip Blackett. He was our guest on a special episode yesterday that is recorded and will be available on all of the regular, totally brain farting right now, all of the regular podcast venues and directories, also on Yergz Radio. And, we finally got to talk this past Tuesday. That was the rescheduled date. I apologize, of course, profusely for being a sleepyhead. And I really like this guy. Except for one thing. He's a Trump supporter. And what I love about it, though, is that you can sit down and talk to him. You can have an intelligent conversation, which makes me think he's really not a Trump supporter. I think he's a spy. But he is, and he can take jokes. If you see him on the monitor right now, you see he's laughing at it, and yeah, welcome back. He was our guest yesterday. He's our guest host today, Phil Blackett. Welcome, Philip. Thanks for joining us again.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me again.
And so let me move you up to that corner.
Now, on the right?
Yep, exactly. Yep. And I just took a test yesterday, a 10-question test, so I'm sure it's really thorough. From Hager University. Hager U. Have you heard about this? It's some right-wing thing, and I didn't know that at the time. And after my 10 questions, they said I'm very far left. And I'm like, but I got more guns than you do. And I actually read the Bible. But it turns out they're kind of right. Speaking of formerly on the right, now down at the bottom of your screen, I met this man last fall sometime, I think through Facebook or LinkedIn, one of the two. And I was listening. I first of all, he's got great artwork for his album cover of his podcast. So obviously, okay, attention getting. Let's take a look at this. Outrage Overload is the name of his parent company podcast. He's got a couple now that come under that brand, and I thought, okay, I have no idea what that is. I don't think. Maybe I do. I kind of sort of have an idea now. Let's listen, and it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. How what he refers to, and he took a humble approach. I remember this saying that he probably wasn't the first one to coin this term, and maybe he knows that he's not. But the first time I heard the term anger porn, and he's right. Our world loves to be angry and pissed off. And sometimes I can't say that they've got oh, I just saw something. I got to change quick. All right, hopefully that'll I don't think we're on in the 1490. Um yeah, I got to figure this out still. Last week it worked, or 2 weeks ago it worked.
They're going to be the next one to be laid off. And I have seen the variety of.
Yeah, that didn't happen. They got something else on now. Well, I'll have to figure that out. So where was I? Anger.
Anger porn.
Yeah, and I just there's such a good word for it, and the title, Outrage Overload, is definitely where we're at in society. He's been a guest on both sides now with Jane Stahl and me. He's been a guest other podcasts as well. He's had his own live shows recently on the Knife's Edge, where he had a panel of his previous guests on it from his own podcast in a really cool roundtable discussion. So let's welcome David Beckemeyer, the Outrage Overlord.
Thanks, Yergz. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So that one, Outrage Overlord, was actually a typo, wasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people hear Outrage. The podcast is Outrage Overload, kind of like an overloaded truck, like if you think of that. But a lot of people hear Outrage Overlord, so that's what they thought. And maybe I have a speech impediment, so that comes across that way. But and then also somehow people read often that they read the words and somehow see Outrage Overlord. So I've said, yeah, okay, then I'm the Outrage Overlord. I might as well just run with it. So that's what we do. Yeah, appreciate the little intro there. Happy to say more about it or participate any way we can help tonight.
I
or this morning. Sorry,
people to learn about this. If you are in politics on any level, even if you just discuss it with your family, and there's so many other social issues that are politics related, this is a must listen. I've told him multiple times, he saved me from having a stroke. I still get in the occasional, what I call Facebook fights. No, Phil, nothing for you. No Facebook. God love you, man. Both of you. I started with a positive intention. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to explain something or share actual expertise. And it's just come to a point where so many people have dug their heels in and they don't. I've done 2 episodes on fact checking and why and how to fact check. People are refusing to do that. Their source of information is Dan Bongino or Rachel Maddow. And they think, well, I saw it on the news, so it's accurate. Yeah, no. Now, David, you are a tech guy, out in the Silicon Valley. You're actually in like the Oakland area. Is that right? Like your actual, base of operations now.
Yeah, a little bit even farther east than that, but yeah, the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, that's got to be hot right now.
Actually, not bad. It was hot 2 days ago, but it's not too bad today.
Yeah, I remember when I lived in worked in the San Francisco office. I lived in the city, and I was over, I think, at a Home Depot in the East Bay. I watched it drop 20 degrees
Oh yeah.
just by crossing the bridge.
Oh yeah. Well, and it'll go another 10 when you go through the tunnel, right? So when you get over
Yeah.
that set of mountains, it's even hotter. Yeah, on the anger porn thing, I want to say that, I also use the term outrage porn because it's kind of I also like the term outrage because it kind of as a blanket, for umbrella term for sort of a lot of these different emotions like anger and moral indignation and there's so many people that benefit from trying to get us riled up with those emotions. And then I like the porn part of it because basically, like you said, we're kind of addicted to it. Like we don't want to admit it, but if you look at our behavior, we go back to it, right? It's the thing we engage with. It's the thing we seek out. It's the thing we like. We actually, there's a lot. I mean, talking about the stuff you were just talking about how you go online and the fact checking and like I have a whole show about this. Like I talk to scientists coming from so many different angles, researchers, and also practitioners that are out there trying to kind of help us figure out how to navigate some of these spaces and these conversations, like you say. And it's a big. It's not a little thing. There's not literally one answer to it, but it's a lot of psychology going on, neuroscience going on, and yeah, so that's why I like the outrage porn term, because on the one hand, you have these emotions that people are kind of trying to get us riled up for. On the other hand, it's it's a double-edged sword there, because it's push and pull, because as much as people send it to us, they wouldn't be doing that if we didn't want it, right? There's demand, there's a supply side and demand side, and the demand is strong for it. And one of the reasons, like I said, I don't want to oversimplify it, but one of the reasons is because, the way humans work, the way we have sort of, our evolutionary biology is kind of tribal, right? So we survive by having a tribe. And so once we've sort of picked a tribe, we want to really help reinforce that we made the right choice. So we actually like to see people say terrible things about the other. We like to watch the other side do terrible things. If someone can show us the other side doing something terrible, we actually like that because it helps reinforce that we made the right choice. Yes, I'm right. They're evil. I'm good. Their side is evil. My side is good. And so if you keep showing me that stuff, I want it. I want to see the other side do things that just absolutely infuriate me, because that just helps me legitimize my choice that I'm in the right tribe.
Exactly. So what got you into it? You're a tech guy, not a social scientist in any stretch. What made you say this is an important issue?
Yeah, well, I've always been a science nerd. I mean, I did physics and math in school, and even when I was in the tech world, I ran R&D departments, and so I did run commercial research labs, not so much academic ones. So I was always kind of a science nerd. But yeah, for me, that's where the term outrage overload kind of comes from, the overload side of it, right? I mean, I kind of hit my own personal outrage overload. Like, this stuff is just coming at us all the time, whichever, it's out there in the news. It's, if you watch or pay attention to partisan sources, it's even worse. They're just constantly sending this stuff and telling you how bad the other side is, and also other things. And there's a lot of catastrophizing in media, right? With our short news cycles, they catastrophize everything. So there's outrages every day. And it literally is an outrage overload. Like, there probably are things in the world we should be outraged about. And that's fine. I'm not saying never be outraged, but it's this, we can't run around with the dial turned to 11 and just be outraged about everything all the time. And it's not good for our mental health. It's also just not realistic. Like, a lot of these things are catastrophized. Like, they're not as bad as a lot of people, as either for whatever reason, the media, social media, there's all these players that benefit from doing that, right? Getting us riled up. They want the attention. It helps simplify the story. There's all kinds of reasons why they do it, and it's easy to fall into. And it's really bad for us as our mental health. We can start thinking the world's a lot worse than it is. We can start thinking people are a lot worse than they are. We can start, really being negative about the world and not seeing the positive, which is a natural trait, by the way. There's a thing called negativity bias, that we tend to focus on the negative and kind of gloss over all these positives. So it might take 10 positive things for us to reckon for each one negative thing, right? It takes 10 positive things to sort of counteract the one negative thing. And so for me, it was just that, right? So you had sort of the Trump election, and you had all the sort of turmoil about that. Then you had COVID and lockdowns and all the kind of turmoil about people taking stances on all those kinds of things. And so, and what I saw in my personal life is friends disconnecting from friends that have been friends forever. You saw people disconnecting with their own family members and losing touch and losing contact and not able to speak to one another anymore. And that just kept escalating more and more, where I saw more and more of that. And so this just is like, okay, there's more going on here. And I thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity to sort of look into this. Do I start a blog? And it seemed like a podcast was an interesting way to do it, because you could go a little deeper than the sort of 2-minute soundbite in a news clip. And so I could go a lot deeper, and I could actually have like a dialogue and a conversation, and I could sort of take the role of, I'll bring some of these experts without, we'll try to skip the math and try to not, talk 2 hours to try and impress each other with how smart we are. I'll be the dumb guy asking the dumb questions that people would like to know, and bring it down to like a layman's terms of what is some of this science telling us, what is some of this research telling us, and then what are the practitioners out there, community leaders and others, like looking at these problems, what can they tell us, where can they provide some hope?
Yeah. God love you. I'm going to let, I know Philip's got to be drooling to talk to you. So yeah, I'm going to let him take over for a second.
Yeah, so I think even just listening to you, a lot of things came up top of mind for me. One was for me not to go down the gutter on just the terminology of anger porn, right? Because I think,
Right.
I think what comes off to that was me just even like thinking that it's like, okay, how did you come up with that name? Why is porn associated with it? And then you're kind of thinking through, okay, take me from start to finish that cycle of porn. Right? It might be something where it's like you feel to begin with, right? I'm just totally going on a limb here. You're longing for something. You're wanting to experience something that maybe a little creepy, maybe something you want to keep hidden, but you have that urge for it. And it might be this instance of like, I'm angry about something. I want to exhibit it some way, shape, or form without me getting in trouble. Right. And oftentimes we like to be voyeurs. I'll use a porn related word on that one. We like to be voyeurs of other people's anger. Right. So to Yerg's point, we're much more likely to want to see a video of somebody getting trampled, run over, attacked on a social media platform than us actually experiencing it. We much rather see somebody get cursed out in the comments on Facebook, which is why I don't condone Facebook fights, Yergz.
Try.
And you'll see people liking it, right? Some people hopping on the bandwagon there. But then at the same time, even when you go through the experience, what also goes in my head too, you go through the actual experience, you bow down, for lack of a better word, to your fleshly desires. You go through the whole experience.
So you keep going back to the porn thing too.
I'm trying to better conceptualize and understand this. This is a significant concept to me, because I do agree with him. There's a significant portion of this in our culture and society, just like in social media for sure. The other part of it too is like once you go through the whole experience, what happens afterwards? You're looking for some sort of release, right? You're looking for some sort of climax, some sort of like, whoo, I feel better. Maybe it's because you got your thoughts out there. Maybe you like really gave it to that person in the comment section. Sorry, Yergz, you just got it coming to you, I guess. But I think at the same time, what also comes off is, okay, now that that's happened, either you feel empowered by the experience, you feel like, oh, I feel more relieved and more relaxed. Um, I can go on about my day, or do you have a sense of that wasn't what I was hoping for? It's almost like you finish what you were hoping to finish, but you also felt some sort of remorse afterwards, like, ooh, um, that did seem kind of bad for me liking that video, or ooh, I didn't know I was really into that type of anger. you know um so I think it's really interesting you conceptualize that word, because I think to a certain degree, of course, I definitely see that a lot. And whether it's social media or the movies we watch, the TV shows and that sort, um it just, I think it's just making us worse as a people.
Right. I mean, it is kind of a type of porn where you never get off. but 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 yeah, it's a lot more subtle than that too, because I mean, just looking at one tweet from a partisan, you could say a Tucker Carlson or somebody on the left, Rachel Maddow or something, right? Just one tweet, often is this anger porn stuff or outrage porn, right? Because they're trying to say something that the other side did this outrageous thing, and they're trying to get you mad. Same thing, 5 minutes of MSNBC or 5 minutes of Fox News. And even the regular news does this too, a little bit less because they might have some more local stories and things like that. But even some of those stories are this way. But it's much more subtle than that. Like just turning on your news and listening to your favorite commentator, they're delivering outrage porn left and right. In between, maybe every once in a while, something a little bit more legitimate. But if you listen carefully and you're hearing that stuff and you're liking it, wow, they just told me Joe Biden did this terrible thing. They just told me Trump did this terrible thing. And I'm going, yeah, that's what I thought. I knew he was like that. and and so it's much more subtle than than this more extreme stuff of like people beating on each other with a stick. It's happening all day long. And people do like it for a brief moment, like we think we like it, but it doesn't have the deeper effects are the long-term effects are bad. If we talk about habits, our brain doesn't know the difference between good habits and bad habits, right? We just have habits.
Mhm.
And we get the same amount of near-term juice, some kind of neurotransmitter for a bad habit or a good habit. We only call them good habits or bad habits as to what their long-term consequences are, right? So, our brain keeps getting this little jolt of juice that we think feels good in the moment, but it's not helping us long term because it's making us agitated and mad and angry and upset, and we don't like the world and we think things are bad, and we want to flip the apple cart because everything's broken. It's like we don't take that step back and look at the big picture. So yeah, it is a lot like porn where you don't actually get off.
Well, and I think to your point too, I think what's interesting is, have you ever heard like the saying where it's like, look, if doctors could truly solve your problems, there would be no need for medicine. That they would be basically like healing themselves out of a job.
Well,
I think
particularly
it's,
psychologists.
yeah, you can include that too, right? If you truly could solve the problem for people that they never had to come back, you probably be solving your way out of a job. I think it's something similar to either whether it's on the left side, like a Maddow, or the right side with a Tucker Carlson. Like, if you're not pumping this content, if you want to call it that, where it's like on the left side, what are we going to talk about? All right, let's hinge on the Trump trial and 34 counts, and let's make a whole show based off that. Or on the right side, oh, let's show clips on Instagram, a compilation of President Biden falling and having like issues that would make you say, hey, he should probably be more retired than presidential at this point.
Meanwhile, Trump can't even stand up. He's got to ride a golf cart because he can't walk a golf course.
So
That's
so
smart.
so case in point, right? It's like we come up with stuff that can rile up our base, so to speak, that can get more likes, get more comments. But the people that are doing that oftentimes, and I can say this because on social media, I purposely follow people on both sides of the spectrum politically just to see what they're doing. And they're pretty much coming out of the same playbook. They're putting out content that's going to make you feel a certain type of way, make you comment, make you like, make you share. And all that does is it helps them, because if we truly figure out a way to solve our problems and figure out a way to coexist and respect one another without getting to name calling that sort, these people would be outside of, they wouldn't have platforms. They wouldn't have
their job,
millions of followers and that sort. So there's like a
well,
vested interest they have to keep this going.
well, it's more. I think it's, yeah, that's true, but it's also yes, and is that a big piece of it is it keeps their life simple, right? If you're a politician, right? If the only message I have to say is the other side is terrible, like Joe Biden can't stand up,
It's
then
lazy.
it's lazy, right? It's much easier. Like all I have to do is tell you how bad the other side is, and I don't have to be accountable later to my promises, or I don't have to be accountable later to actually doing anything, right? So for politicians and for the news media, it's similar, right? If they can come up with a story that all they have to do is kind of keep people mad about whatever the other side's doing, that's a simpler story. It's easier. I don't have to tell you the nuance, right? So that's a big piece of it. Now, you're right. For social media and these others, a lot of that is, how am I going to get the likes? Well, I'm going to do something outrageous. I'm going to very selectively edit things. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. I mean, and that's not new. It's just that social media causes that to be out there in such large numbers, and and so, but I'll say, like, we kind of keep saying those people do this and they do that. Oh no, we do it. Like, you are doing it, I am doing it, Ross is doing it, we're all doing it, right? And you may not think you're doing it, and I may not think I'm doing it, but if you're watching a news source, you have selected out some of those bits that are the stuff you like to hear, right? And they're going to help reinforce. So we're all doing it. Now, the degree to which we can add a buffer to it, add some, thought to it, and step back from it, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my podcast. Have us all sort of try to apply this lens and particularly focus it on you and your side first, because that's where we have the authority. So if our side, somebody who purports to be on our side, whatever we call our side, is doing it, that's where we should focus and say, I don't like this kind of content. I don't want you to do this anymore, and I'm not going to give you the attention. I'm not going to give you the likes. And, if we can try to find, and you get people like, I think Spencer Cox would be an example out of Utah that has tried to work on this more, that, you guys aren't going, the other side's not going away. Like, no matter how bad you tell me they are, they're not going away. We need to work together. And we don't have, I'm not saying give up on your values. I'm not saying, but before we even get to that point, for you personally, for each of us personally, when I say you now, I mean the collective you, for each of us personally, like, try to apply this lens that your side is sending you this stuff, and look at it from almost like an observer's perspective. Like, say like, oh yeah, that's a score's about an 8 on the outrage porn scale. There that was a statement that, like, oh, that, and the trigger is usually the indicator that you don't have all the facts. Like, you're getting and they may not be lying, they may not be telling, straight out lies, but it's selective editing, that kind of thing. They're leaving out nuance or leaving out detail. So when you feel that, like, you're mad at the other side, your side made you mad at the other side, that's your indicator to stop and ask, are they telling me the whole story? Is that really the whole story? If did Joe Biden fall down straight time this many times, and how did that compare to other people falling down or whatever? Or can Trump not stand up? When I get one of these data points, that's your indicator. If you're feeling it, that's your indicator to step back for a minute and say, okay, that person's probably trying to make me mad. So now they're trying to make me mad. So then how much truth is there? Is this the full story? And, sometimes, yeah, it's going to be the full story. Maybe that's it. It really is a bad thing. And you got to decide, put it in your bank of outrages and decide where to categorize it. But for me, that's kind of one thing that I think is a place to start. Start with yourself and your own side, because that's where we have some authority. It's easy to just yell about the other side doing it all day. Well, we're already doing that, so we're not getting anything. So start calling out our own side and see if we can get changes. See if we can get, turn this from me doing it and 2 other people doing it, turn that into a movement where we start demanding it. And, social platforms aren't going to do it for us, right? The cavalry is not coming. We're going to have to do this collectively. And, my dream is that, you and I, Philip, go to a rally, and the rally is about, like, we're not going to behave this way anymore. We're both going to hold the flag. We're both going to say we're Americans, and and we don't want our politicians to be telling us how terrible I am or how terrible you are anymore. Pick whatever color you want to go, or Ross, you and I go do that, right? Same thing. The idea is that we're here together. Maybe we stand for different things, but what we're not going to stand for is our side constantly telling us how the other side is evil, is going to destroy the world.
Yep. So I definitely agree with you there, David. I think that, it's kind of sad, because when I think about times where those moments actually did come about, where we saw past our differences and were more united, um, usually were times of like deep national tragedy or threats. I think for me, one that comes top of mind for me was 9/11. Like, that was a moment where it's just like you had people really like unite around the flag and us as a nation. Yeah, we might be a dysfunctional family, which is what I like to characterize us all as. We're on different sides and we're still at a dysfunctional family reunion when we come together. But at the same time, there should be something that unites us as a family, and it shouldn't have to come at um, the whim of such tragedies that basically say, hey, if we don't figure out a way to pull ourselves together and work together, there's not going to be a country for us to live in, or there's not going to be a freedom we're going to actually enjoy, where we can't actually go back and forth on Facebook and that sort of thing. It's like we got to think of something much bigger than what we're being petty about.
Back actually on the air.
Hey, Ross, I think you're on mute.
I'm not hearing you, Ross.
You can't, like, you're fading it. You're coming in and out.
Well, while you figure it out, what I'll say is, one thing I'll add to that is, we're kind of tearing ourselves apart, from the inside, right? I mean, you talk about the dysfunctional family. There's a lot of parallels there. Because we've really never been like we've never been. Things have never been as good as they are right now, right? But we all have this negative.
We still have
stuff.
something to complain about still.
Right. We have to find something to complain about. And I think if you look at our external threats, we're probably about as secure as we've ever been, and so we don't have these external threats. And there's a whole there's several generations now that have never really perceived threats like that, these external threats, right? We just kind of haven't. I mean, there's a lot of generations that have no idea of what that's like. And so for some reason, we just start tearing ourselves apart from the inside out. And, I think we have to, like, it's too bad we have to kind of see these external things happen before we realize, maybe we should be more together.
Yeah, because I think it gets back to like a parable where it's like, a house divided cannot stand, right? So if we're divided to the point that we're fighting ourselves, even from like a national security standpoint, I would feel threatened, because any enemy of ours, as far as like America's concerned, is like, oh, just let America just keep festering, keep fighting, right, keep dividing itself, go into civil war, that sort of thing. And at its weakened point, then we can come and take over.
Right. And if you look at and that's what our adversaries are doing, that, right? They're not necessarily creating these wedges. They're just driving, they're not creating these divisions. They're just driving the wedges into them. Yeah, they're stoking the fire. Yeah, and it's easy because we fall into it. I think, if you look at like the stuff that was going on with the Russians and the Chinese and the Iran and other countries do this as well. But, if you look at that, like, they didn't do that much. It was mostly us, right? They seeded these conversations, but it was Americans who took it on and fought over it, right? So we're the ones who reshared that stuff and made it viral and made it have an effect. So it's like, they just stoked, as you say, they just stoked the fire. And I think beyond just division, I mean, I think division might always be there. Like, we might always have differing opinions on things, and I don't see that as a bad thing. Like, I mean, that's probably going to be true, but what the problem is the bitterness, right? And the sort of, like, we have basically, many people are ready to just discount or just dismiss half the country as either they're stupid or they're racist or they're woke sheep, or they're, and we're ready to just dismiss half the country. And that's the basis of democracy that I'm worried about, right? Because one thing about, a free country is you have to assume it operates on the assumption that everybody's making rational decisions. And sure, there are crazy people here and there that aren't. But if we get to the point where we think half the country is so dumb or so brainwashed that they can't make rational decisions anymore, we have no foundation for the disagreement. We have no foundation for democracy itself. So this is where we need to step back, and we've talked ourselves into this, right? I mean, we've done it to ourselves because we keep telling ourselves these stories. And so if we believe it, one of the scientists one of the social researchers that I had on, said, when people ask this question about, why is there violence, he was saying, why has there not been violence? If you believe these stories, if you believe that democracy will end at the next election, if you believe that the judicial system is now rigged, if you believe all these things that we keep telling ourselves, why not violence, right? I mean, we should not be surprised.
Well, yeah, because I agree, and I believe that our beliefs educate our behavior and they influence our behavior. So if it is to the point you think that, for example, that the election is going to be a stake on democracy, whether it's going to survive or not, then that will likely influence what you do and what you say going forward to either make that a reality or come against it in that sort. But the thing is, we don't know if that's true or not. But you're going off of what I would say is imperfect, limited information that is making you take on actions that could have significant long-term consequences.
Right. Yeah. And that's why we have to stop telling ourselves these stories, right? If we're going to keep telling ourselves these stories, we should not be surprised that violence escalates, right? And, because if you believe these stories that whether it's going to be Trump or Joe Biden, you see these stories, and you see people say in the media and elsewhere, and of course even in real life, because they parrot what they've heard, is you see these people say Joe Biden will be the end of the country, or Trump will be the end of the country, right? You see these statements, not if they might do these 6 things that will be potentially a problem, but this will happen. Like, if they're elected, this will happen, like definitively will happen. And if you believe that, then I don't see why you wouldn't, like you say, take some extreme action.
Well, I think the interesting part about it too, David, is this election, just speaking about the presidential election, is so significant to us because it's the first time you're actually having 2 people that have served as president before. And so it's like, we've had a time that we quote unquote survived Trump, and we had a time that we are surviving Biden, right? But I would imagine if we go back to those elections before each one served their term, there were people on the opposite side saying, oh my gosh, if Trump beats Hillary, this whole country is going down in the wastebasket. And then during COVID, there was a thought that a group of people were saying, if Biden gets elected and replaces Trump, this whole country is going down the wastebasket. And we're still here,
right?
Through both of them,
right? Right. Exactly. I mean, right. I mean, the funny thing now is, Biden is the president now, so he's going to become president and cause problems. Like, he's already the president. Like, just like, like you say, Trump was the president before too. And we survived it. What will happen? Regardless, we don't know, as you say, we don't know what will happen. Like, we might say, we know he said he's going to do this and he said he's going to do that. And this, so we might know some of the things he wants to do, or we might know some of the policies on Biden that we don't like. But there's no way we know for sure that they are going to do X, Y, Z, or X, Y, Z can even happen, right? I mean, there might be pushbacks and backstops and other things. We kind of forget that we don't know enough about how our own democracy works sometimes, or how our own government.
Yeah,
and that causes us to believe some of these ideas, and also it causes us to, this is another problem, our civics problem, that it causes us to have unrealistic expectations too, right? Like, the United States government was designed to not work very well, right? It's designed to be really difficult to make things happen because you don't want minority or majority rule, particularly majority rule. So So it has all these backstops about that, and power is distributed around, and it can be really hard to get things to happen. And so, these candidates that make these promises, and the news media that sort of says, yeah, this person better do this thing. Well, it's like, they're going to have a hard time doing that thing because about half the country doesn't want that thing to happen. So, and they have representatives in government as well. So I mean, we just often just don't understand that government, it is kind of cumbersome and it's difficult to get things done. And these expectations can really get us angry because we expected our guy got in there and he didn't do these things he said he was going to do. Well, because it's really hard to get those things done.
Yeah, like to your point, David, like if history serves as any indicator, how many presidents said they were going to do these things when they were trying to get elected that were able to do 100% of what they promised they would do when
Or
they
even
got in
10%.
office, right? And
Yeah.
to your point, like there's definitely a lot of variables that play a role as far as whether or not you get certain things done, and some things are just outside of your control. But with that being said, to your point, a lot of the fear that the opposition for either candidate has, one thing that comes to my mind is you don't know for sure that candidate is going to do the exact thing you're fearing.
Or even
Oftentimes we
be
get
able to, even if they try, they may not be able to.
absolutely, and oftentimes we get so caught up in what I would say is maybe even anxiety porn, fear porn, if you want to
Right,
call it that,
right.
right? Where we get so wound up by it, by something that very likely will not happen to the exact degree that you're fearing. And we
Exactly.
get so caught up on it and we take actions based off of that possibility, even if it might be a remote possibility. And what happens out of that is you're doing your best to prevent somebody from getting into office. But that person may not do what you've been fearing.
Well, and you can only do so much too, and so that creates anxiety and frustration as well, right? I can only vote one time in one place, right? So how much can I do? Like, okay, I can go advocate, I can go, like send money, do these things. But if somebody's going to tell me like every day that you are threatened, this person's going to destroy the world, do something. Well, I can only vote one time. Dude, I can only vote one time. What do you want from me? And like, how many times do you want me to send you checks? Like, I'm not going to send you money all the time either. So what can I really do? I can vote once. So, you just keep scaring me more and more. It's not helping anybody. And I get frustrated about that quite a bit, that, these just statements of, yeah, you told me already. Like, I don't need to hear it anymore. Stop telling me these things. It's not helping anything. It just get me more scared and more anxious and more upset about it. And no, I can only do so much. So that's not counterproductive as well. And the other side of, like you're talking about, can people get this, or the difficult of getting things done? The other side of getting things done is working together, right? Because nobody's going to build a majority that's going to just be able to do everything they want. It's just not realistic, right? It's not the way. We are a divided country. Those kind of majorities are a thing of the past unless anything changes, and nothing on the horizon is indicating that those kind of changes are happening. So we are a very divided country. That's not going away. So the way to get anything done, the way things get done now is you have to find things that can have a fairly broad support across parties, enough to pull in some from the other side, regardless of what side you're on, and regardless of who's in power. Even if you have a majority, there's enough things about, on purpose, in our process, in our U.S. government system, that can make it difficult to do things without some broad support. So it's very hard to get extreme ideas pushed through. They need to find broad support, and that's a thing we also aren't, like, we're just not very educated about. Like, we don't want to believe that, because we want to believe that somehow we're going to be able to establish this big majority and get all of our brilliant, either progressive or strongly conservative things all done. Well, it's difficult. That's going to be really hard to do and unlikely. And as long as we never want to work together, like, working together compromise has become a bad word. Even just not being mean to the other side has become like something that's difficult to do. Like, if I'm not mean enough to the other side, I lose points with my side. And, that's all on us. Like, we need to be the ones who start changing that, and start finding not only the humanity, but the rationality and the, instead of focusing and framing the arguments on the other side in the worst possible light, we need to start finding and capturing the places where there could be more broad support, where the arguments make sense. Maybe we don't agree with them, but at least we can understand the logic that got there. We can understand the rationality behind it. We can understand, that it's a reasonable thing to see how they got there. And we're just not there now. We just throw these things out as though they're completely unreasonable. We frame them in the worst possible light, and then everybody just shuts down to it, right? So now compromise becomes a bad word. And when compromise is a bad word, you should not be surprised nothing happens in government, right? Because like I said, in order for things to get done in our system of government, there needs to be a fairly broad support for it.
How about now, guys?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Back from commercial, I guess. I think it was actually the microphone itself died.
Wow.
Because everything is connected, just fine. So, sorry about that.
Day the microphone died.
We were back on 1490, I think. But I'm still not hearing myself, though. Yeah, I wanted to get the two of you together one way or another after I met and first talked with Philip on Tuesday, given that he started out as somewhat democratic and progressive and liberal from a family that was that way. And then in more recent years, just like you started, David, to look at the outrage, he started to look at his own political viewpoints and read both profiles and said, you know what, I'm more Republican than Democrat. What kind of changes have both of you seen in people over the past 10 years?
I think for one thing, I'll mention, Ross, like you mentioned, like what was that website you went on that kind of shared with you where you align in terms of views and perspectives?
That one was a test from an email that I got.
So
there's others. I think you and I talked about another one. Ad Fontes Media takes people and articles from the media and journalists and so on and rates each individual article, rates the network, rates the person, and they've created their own scale that says you're here, there, or wherever. So it might have been that we were talking about.
So I'm just pulling up a website. Yep, this is the one I did. So it's a website called isidewith.com.
Okay.
I side with ISIDEWITH.com. And this is probably the closest thing to what I did back in 2016 when I looked at both, platforms for both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I realized upon looking at both of them, I'm more aligned with the Republican side of things versus the Democrat. And I remember back in 2016, I went on this website. In 2020, went on the same website too, answered their questions, basically getting the sense of like, hey, where do you stand on this issue, this topic, to what degree? And it's like a survey, it's like a quiz. And at the end of it, it said, hey, you're Ross, this percentage likely to vote for Joe Biden, and this percentage to vote for Donald Trump, and this one for Jill Stein, But at least you got some sense that on a just objective, answer the question, stick to the facts. What do you believe in? You find out where you align with. And to answer your question, Ross, I think what's different from 10 years ago is we're not, as a people, doing that sort of thing. We're not sticking to what do we believe in? Just stick to the facts. Give me the question. Let me answer it. And then that will tell me essentially who am I likely to go with as far as a candidate or a party or a policy for that matter. We're more likely to let, as we talked about before, letting certain talking heads that are trying to engender more anger porn, right, David? That's trying to get us a certain way to get us upset about things that we're not even looking at the issues at hand. We're just trying to figure out, okay, today, what can I be upset at Trump about now? What can I be upset at Biden about? What can I get pissed off by the Democrats or Republicans on? But we're not trying to figure out, okay, where do we side with? what issues are important to us, and based off of that, that tells you how you should go about voting, not just for president, but also for Congress, for your state legislature, your school board, all the way down, where people are actually going off of like the merits of an issue rather than like the personality or peer pressure or name calling, just to try to figure out, where you actually stand on things.
Well, or tribe as well too, right? So, I mean, one thing about the I had the guy that wrote the book, The Myth of Left and Right, Hiram Lewis, and his brother Vernon, I think's his name. So those two brothers wrote that book, and and they talk about that the whole myth and the whole right and left spectrum is kind of a made up thing and doesn't really mean it. There's no underlying principle behind it. It's just random policies that get dumped in each bucket, and they've changed over time, and they change all the time, and people just stay with it because that's the tribe they like better. So to your point, like, people don't necessarily go back and say, well, are these issues still the same ones I cared about 10 years ago? And a lot of us also don't necessarily pay attention to all the issues. Like, we may not, like, if you had 16 things, like if you look at the list there that under top issues, for a lot of us, maybe there's only 4 in there I really care about that much, one way or the other. You know what I mean? There's not that important to me. But you're not allowed to say that kind of thing, right? You're not allowed to talk like that or be that way, because you're not allowed to disagree with your tribe on issues. And I don't know the specific poll and what, like you say, when it goes up and down ballot, whether what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea of be more issue based and try to be less tribe based would be a big step. I mean, it's very hard because we're just such tribal beasts that it's very hard not to have a tribe. But maybe you can find tribe somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, I really agree with that. And there's another one I want to mention called, another one of these quiz type things, another way to look at it. It's the Hidden Tribes Project. And so it's hiddentribes.us. And it has a quiz too, and they break it down by some different, and this is more about ideology than it is about issues, but it's another way to sort of look a little bit more about, and it may violate what I was just saying about how there aren't underlying principles to these things, but it's really a snapshot we have to realize too, because like I say, these parties move around, and often we don't like check to see, should I still be in this party? Like, they changed over time. Does it still align with me?
That's where I wanted to jump in a second ago. Everybody's thinking everybody else is strictly down party lines, and that is just simply not true.
No.
37% of Republicans are pro-choice. 20% of Democrats carry a gun. Not pro-Second Amendment. Carry a gun.
Mm-hmm.
So now just imagine how many are pro-Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, David, about, there's always somebody on the other side that's going to vote in the opposite direction that, I think is going to happen, or whatever. That, my brothers are particularly Trump supporters because my whole family carries guns, and I'm the only one that was in law enforcement. But my whole family is very concealed carry oriented, and they won't vote for Biden on the sole fact that he's coming after their guns. And I'm like, have you looked into the statistics of his chances of doing that before you've actually made your decision?
Right. Even if he wanted to, it's one of those things that there isn't broad support. There's broad support for certain things, like, okay, yeah, you might do some more background checks, some other things, but yeah, no, that's not going to fly.
Yeah. And before my mic died on us, and before we lost 1490, and before we had all kinds of fun today, one of the things I asked earlier about people changing. Philip, you went from one side to another. I have 2 cousins who have not talked to themselves. That's all they got left. They have not talked to each other in more than a year. My mom joked about the first presidential election I was in as a voter. I was supporting Ross Perot. I did not vote for him ultimately because he dropped out when he came back in. I didn't think that was what a president should be doing. But she was from the get-go supporting Bill Clinton, and my dad was for George H.W. None of us starting out had the same candidate, but we weren't fighting. We actually kind of joked about the fact that none of us had the same candidate. I went home last week for my grandmother's funeral, and last year, I forget if it was for Christmas or Thanksgiving, for holidays, I was told specifically that I am not going to be talking politics. They don't understand where my brothers come from, because my mom and dad aren't Trump supporters either. But we're not starting any family fights. And then who asks all kinds of questions but both of my brothers. But we're not even allowed to talk politics because of the fights that ensue. When talking about it, Blake, who's not with us today, he said that's actually the problem.
Yep.
We need to be talking about it.
It's sad.
So I wanted to make sure you guys met, and I'm sorry that Philip, you didn't have all that much time to do some homework, coming into today. Yesterday's show and today's show were very much ad hoc. I usually thank you, by the way, too, David. This is your day off. You usually don't schedule appointments for Fridays, so thank you again. It was a little bit last minute that we talked yesterday during our 8:00 a.m. call that we're both on, and now all of a sudden you're on the next day. So we'll definitely have you back later, especially closer to probably maybe sometime around the debate, or maybe right after the debate, or whatever you think is best for your schedule. But we never did get back on 1490. I thought we did, but I don't know what happened there. My mic's back. I mean, how do I sound? My headphones aren't picking this up the way the other mic sounded. So
loud and clear over here.
Okay,
Yeah, seems fine. Seems good.
Obviously, I've got a lot of sound checks to do today, and retweaking of whatever else. But I want to let everybody know where they can find both of you in our last couple of minutes. David Beckemeyer, let's take that off. David can be found, his podcast, Outrage Overload. And actually, you know what? Let's talk about some of the others. You got This Week in Outrage, Science Bites, and are there one or two more?
Well, those are the three that I keep under the Outrage Overload umbrella right now. I mean, I'm talking about doing more stuff, and I may do some more series within Outrage Overload. So I may start doing. I'll drop the bomb here. I think I'm going to do one called OK Boomer, and I'm going to bring on people that are younger to talk about various issues.
Yep. I remember you saying that. I think it was yesterday's call. That's. I thought we got some.
Yeah, I actually spelled your name wrong. I mean, correctly. I was like thinking, did I get that right? I did. But from just audio, I wasn't sure how to spell it, but I made a little note, and it looks like I got it right. Good.
Phillips.
Yeah, Phillips' name.
Yeah,
Phillips' last name, Blackett.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't sure.
And there's Philip. Get out of the way.
Awesome.
I have found. We asked. My co-hosts and I bus on each other for an entire show. And I asked Philip yesterday, we're here in the middle of the day. There you are, dressed very well. Nice,
Right.
The collection of books.
I got my T-shirt on over here.
Yeah. What allows you to be joining us in the middle of the day? And of course, Matt, starts going, oh, he doesn't have a job. No, that's not what I'm saying. Maybe he's a school teacher. Maybe he's a professor or something. Well, it turns out this gentleman with us as our guest host today is a published author. And what do you got? 6 or 8 books on Amazon?
6 books on Amazon.
Yeah. And that QR code right there will get you to it. Did you also have a website too, Philip?
Yeah.
Or is it
Personal website, philipblackett.com.
that's easy enough.
Also on social media as well. Just look up my name, Philip Blackett.
Yep. And that QR code actually works. One technical thing on this show that actually works. I know because I tested that myself. But we'll put that up again so you can see my ugly face. And then back to David.
Well, one thing I'll say about that, talking politics is, we don't practice. We're not in practice for it, right? I mean and so when it happens, we often like fumble, or also because we're so much in our own tribe, we can be sort of shocked by hearing views that are different than what we usually hear. Like we sort of stumble into a room and say these bunch of stuff that is actually maybe more extreme than we realize it is, and a bunch of people nod their heads and go, "Yeah, I know, right?" But then you sort of do that in a place where not everybody's in your tribe, and it can be kind of a startling thing, and we're just not used to it. So we do need to practice that better, and social media is not helping. I mean, I have tons of research. I've had guests bring on a lot of research about social media, and basically our human brains simply are not prepared for the way discussions happen on social media, and they're just not a way to have effective conversations.
Mike Tyson once said that social media gives you people the strength to say things that would otherwise get you punched in the face.
I agree.
Yeah, and so we need to practice it better. And I am a trained moderator with a group called Crossing Party Lines that does hold some of these conversations. There's also an organization called Braver Angels, and there's Living Room Conversations does this. So you might look at spending a little time with some of those organizations, and at least sort of maybe even just observing those conversations. So at least you can kind of get a little bit more comfortable and more familiar with these kind of conversations, because it is a trained thing. Like, it's not innate. Like, our normal psychology is not the way we don't come to this naturally, right? It's something that you actually have to sort of practice.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be doing a lot more of just that. David Beckemeyer, outrageoverload.net is where you can find him. Also on Yergz Radio. Later today, actually, on 99.1 FM in Atlanta, or anywhere in the world on 99.1 FM's website. It's wdjyfm.com. Also yergzradio.com, or anywhere you get internet radio. And, of course, outrageoverload.net. Philip Blackett can be found at philipblackett.com. Is it .com?
Yep.
.com. And again, his 6 books can be purchased through Amazon, that QR code, or search Philip. When you're on Amazon, you'll find it, because that's also how I got him. I know that'll work as well. Blake Fisher will probably be back next week remotely. In the meantime, you can get him at thehomelessconservative.com. Blake at thehomelessconservative.com if you want to email him. Matthew Deemer is also available on Yergz Radio and wherever you get podcasts with Daily Crypto News. He's part of our news hour. And you can reach him at matt@dailycryptonews.net or info@deemerforcongress.com. You can get any of us here, news at yergz.com, through email. You had the chance to call. Nobody did today. That's fine. We'll put that back up next time. All right, gang. Thanks for joining us. Both of you, thanks for joining us. Philip, I'll be talking with you hopefully soon to get you on Yergz Radio as well. And have you guys by any chance exchanged info yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, once we go off the air, stay put. And because David, I think Philip will be definitely a good interview for you, coming from what we call the far, what some of my friends call the far right. But yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you again next week.
Hey, gang. This is Up the Middle with your hosts on the right, the homeless conservative Blake Fisher, and on the left, the Democratic nominee for Congress in the 7th District of Ohio, Matt Deemer. And somewhere in the middle, I'm retired Secret Service Special Agent Ross Yergz. You'll come to know me as Yergz. Let's get to it.